Want to start a podcast, or are you already a podcast host? What would you say if I told you that you can get paid up to $31 per guest you interview, and I can help you book those guests? If you want to start making more money with your podcast right now and interview great guests who your listeners will love, it's not too good to be true. It's Podmatch. If you use my Podmatch link in the show notes right now, Podmatch will pay you up to $31 per interview. Yes, up to $31 per interview. I did not stutter. If you want to make more money from your podcast while expanding your reach and getting more listeners, simply click our Podmatch link in the show notes right now to check out this really cool opportunity. Hey, welcome back to the Podgasm Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Fleming, and we teach you how to clarify your podcast brand messaging so your podcast will grow. So in this episode, we're going to discuss how do you write an about section for your podcast that grabs the maximum amount of the right people's attention so they subscribe and listen to your podcast over and over again. And something that's really going to help you with this, if you don't have it already, be sure and go grab the free Speak Your Listeners Language PDF. It's a simple 3-page PDF that's going to show you 7 super simple keys to easily crafting a powerful brand message for your podcast that will make your podcast more appealing to more of the right people so your show will grow. So look, if you want more people to notice your podcast more often and subscribe to it, just go grab that right now. It's free. Just click the link in the show notes that says Speak Your Listeners Language right now. So lots of new podcasters have no idea how to write their about sections, quote, the right way, so they can grab the most amount of attention in the fastest amount of time possible so their show will grow. You're looking to grab the most amount of attention from the right people in the smallest amount of time. And having a clear, compelling, targeted brand message is going to allow you to do that. The problem is most new podcasters, they don't know how to do this, which is where I come in, which is where this podcast comes in, because this is the unique way this show helps you grow your show. So today I'm going to break down what I call the perfect about section, which means I'm going to give you a fill-in-the-blank script framework to make this super easy for you. And if you haven't listened to episodes 1 through 8, be sure to do that no matter what, because this may not be as simple for you right now. So go back and do that, and it will be, but it'll be easier for you when you grasp those very simple concepts and understand them that I talk about in episodes 1 through 8. What I'm about to teach you is going to change the game for you when it comes to communicating your value clearly and growing your podcast show and getting more subscribers and more consistent return listeners. But first, let me ask you this really quick, fellow podcaster. Are you looking for an easy way to record your podcast episodes in world-class high quality, edit them in a flash, and make them live without all the technical headaches and confusion? If so, then you're in luck. Riverside FM is the premier podcast recording software that allows you to produce the same high-quality podcasts as other world-famous podcasters your listeners are already enjoying. Look, level up your podcast right now, even if you're brand new, you're not a techie, maybe you don't have a lot of time, so you can attract more listeners to your podcast consistently. This thing has AI software built into it that can cut clips from your podcast and do in 5 seconds what it would take you 5 hours to do, so you can share those to social media and get more exposure and grow your following. So look, simply click the Riverside FM link in the show notes to grow your podcast to the next level, starting right now. Your about section should do 3 things. 1, grab instant attention. 2, say what you do. And 3, say how it benefits your ideal listener. It needs to take into account who your ideal listener is, what your listeners mainly want, the problems they deal with that keep them from getting what they want, the enemies that we talked about in previous episodes, the enemy that keeps them from getting what they want, the feelings caused by those problems, which is what we call propaganda. Again, if you haven't listened to episodes 1 through 8, that is the foundation of this whole podcast. We talk about that. You want to solidify you as a trusted advisor who can help them and give them a very clear call to action at the end. All right. That's the gist of what goes into creating this. All right. Now I'm going to give you some examples here. So let's look at this podcast, the Podgasm Marketing Podcast. If you go at the time of this recording, this is my about section, my podcast info. Clarify your podcast marketing message so more people will show up, subscribe, and listen more often. Now, that is the first sentence. then I have a double space, and then I have a four sentence paragraph that sort of elaborates a little bit. So you don't have to have the first sentence. There's not a right or wrong way with that, having like a clarifying first sentence and then like the paragraph that goes deeper. Sometimes I'll just have the one paragraph I'm about to read to you, but I simply chose to do it this way this time. And who knows, I might change it in the future, but it's the elements in here that are the key, that are most important. Clarify your podcast marketing message so more people will show up, subscribe, and listen more often. Lots of new podcasters struggle to get noticed and grow their show, but it doesn't have to be that way for your show. On the Podgasm Marketing Podcast, we show new and beginner podcasters just like you how to clarify your podcast brand messaging so you'll get noticed more consistently by more of the right people and your podcast will grow faster. If you want to gain more listeners and make more money podcasting, subscribe today because your podcast matters. How's that? A little key here. I started with my ideal listener's problem, the enemy they face. And that's good because that keeps attention. Whenever you stop talking about the enemy that is coming against people on their battlefield, they stop listening to you. And they'll go listen to someone else in some other podcast who will keep addressing it. All right, so there is a framework here. And if you're driving down the road, you obviously can't do this right now, but you need to do this at some point. I'm going to give you right now a literal copy and paste, fill in the blank template. It's super short and it's super easy. You fill in the blanks and then you just sort of rehash and look at it and whittle it down to what you want it to be. So here's the framework for what I just wrote or what I just read to you for this podcast. This is how I came up with it. So if you're in a place you can write something down or type something down, type or write this down. Lots of blank, that is, identify your ideal listener, whoever they are. Struggle to blank. In other words, an outcome they want, they struggle to get this outcome. Then, on the blank podcast, the name of your podcast, we show blank, which is the name of your ideal audience or the type of person they are, how to blank, whatever your show is about and teaches, how to do something or whatever your value is, so you can avoid blank, which is a negative result they don't want, and blank, an end positive result they do want. Subscribe today. All right, so let's break this down a little bit, because if you're listening to this and you didn't write it down, it might seem like a lot. It's not. That's a very, very short framework there. Okay, so write this out for your podcast. Again, I'm gonna reread this podcast, the Podgasm Marketing Podcast. I'm gonna reread mine one more time to give you an idea of what it looks like to fill this in. Lots of new podcasters struggle to get noticed and grow their show, but it doesn't have to be that way for your show. I added that little line in. I didn't have to, but I decided to. On the Podgasm Marketing Podcast, we show new and beginner podcasters just like you how to clarify your podcast brand messaging so you will get noticed more consistently by more of the right people and your podcast will grow faster. See, those are all outcomes that people want if you're a podcaster. If you want to gain more listeners, outcome you want, and make more money podcasting, an outcome you want, subscribe today. That's a call to action right there because your podcast matters. So again, if you need to re-listen to this episode, go ahead and do it. Rewind this, go back, listen to the framework that I put out just about a minute and a half ago that I walked you through, and write something out for yours. Write this out for your podcast. I can't stress this enough. Fill in the blanks and start playing with the words. And to be really effective, go show it to people who are actually your ideal listeners and ask if they'll read this, if they'd want to subscribe. Ask them to read it and if it makes them want to subscribe to a podcast like that or not. And tell them to be brutally honest with their feedback. Give them permission to be, because you're trying to make something valuable for them and you want to make sure you're hitting your target as far as the way you're describing what you do. And people are usually happy to help and give their opinions. And by the way, do you know another podcaster that this episode may help? If so, please share it with them. Just click that share button and share it with them in a text really quick or something like that. It only takes about 3 seconds and it'll help them and it'll help me to help them in the same way I'm trying to help you today. Do you struggle to write compelling and effective brand messaging that gets your podcast noticed? Do you want more people to listen to your podcast, but you struggle to talk about it in a way that grabs their attention and keeps it? If your podcast marketing messaging is not up to par, you are losing listeners. But maybe you don't know anything about copywriting and writing marketing messaging and such. Fortunately for you, I've been doing it for over 17 years. Do you want me to write your podcast marketing messaging for you in a clear, powerful, and compelling way that grabs your ideal listener's attention and makes them want to listen to your podcast over and over again? Each month I take on a small, limited number of clients and rewrite their podcast marketing messaging for them. Yes, I do all the hard work for you, and you just get to enjoy the benefits of it without any of the headaches when I'm done. If you want me to craft clear, distinct, and compelling marketing messaging that grows your podcast for you so you can attract more listeners consistently, send me an email right now at podgasmshow@gmail.com. There's a link in the show notes. And put the word consult in the subject line to check my availability.